My art show opened at Triest, I guess last weekend or about a week and a half ago. Um, and I'm going to offer a commentary on each piece in the show. And this is the first of those. So the show is called the show's called Before the Dawn. I saw a prototype before the tongs pulled up a lobe of sky. I saw the light reflected in your eye. And the first piece in the checklist is called the Four Alimonies. And it's like it's a fence post that is blocking the door frame that you need to walk through to enter the show. And the fence post has some spray paint on it, and then each side of the post has a laser engraving of one of the Four Alimonies. And the Four Alimonies are Olalan, Ananon, Elelsin, and Sem. And in forcing the viewer to confront this obstacle to entering the show, you have to like duck under it to go through. At the opening, everyone, or a lot of people, were asking whether they were allowed to go, whether they're allowed to go in. So you sort of end up having to ask permission to go into the show because the post is in your way. And it's these are the four fundamental categories: Olalan, Ananon, Elelsin, and Sem. And the idea here is that the world, reality, has four dimensions. There are four planes of reality. And that sounds like a mystical thing to say. And from one perspective, it is mystical. But this is like a serious claim, that our reality, with like the world that we live in, with its industry and its militaries and geopolitical stuff and the culture industry and the experiences we're all having of our lives and of history, like our actual concrete material world has four dimensions. And this is not ordinarily understood. And those four dimensions, the world can be interpreted from, the entire world can be interpreted from the perspective of each one of those four dimensions. So, for example, Olalan is basically a religious interpretation of the world. So, in our world, there are plenty of people who are, maybe like really hardcore, like swamis or gurus or priests or imams or whatever, rabbis, genuinely religious people interpret the entire world in terms of some kind of religious eschatology. They genuinely believe that the book of Revelation is true, or that they've lived through multiple lives, that this is one of many lives, whatever, right? And like most of the people watching this video don't take that view seriously, but it's enough to say that there are many people who really do believe that, right? That's a full interpretation of the world. And so, in addition to it being possible to interpret the entire world from one of these four perspectives, there is also an age of world history where that perspective was dominant. So prior to the scientific revolution, there were different religious perspectives on the world, including humanism, even really. But the dominant perspective was a religious one, and the art of that period took those views for granted, and so that's not really the it's not the era we're in today, but there is a canon. That view has a place in the canon, and it's still a contemporary view today. And these are four co-equal views, right? No one of them encompasses the other three. So that's Olalan. The second view, the second perspective, so an alimony is kind of like one of these dimensions, perspectives, eras of world history corresponding to a particular mode of production. Second one is Ananon, and you can interpret the entire world from the perspective of Ananon, which compared to the perspective of the Swami or whatever, this is basically the perspective of like the globalist, the faith that increasingly integrated trade, the progress of technology, the progress of the humanities, are they're what's really going on in the world, right? There's sort of an eschatology of like humanist, globalist progressivism. I would say this is maybe like the American imperial view, the view of NATO, and so forth. So this is probably, I don't know, it's definitely one of the main dominant views. Maybe one of two. Maybe it's the dominant view. I would say it's the dominant view. In any other perspective on the world takes for granted that they are an alternative to this view, even if there are others that are pretty widespread also. So this also corresponds to an era in art history. Around the time of the scientific revolution, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, let's say 1600s or so, is the birth of modern art history, of the High Renaissance, basically. So a scientific view towards painting, single point perspective, the works of really just Christian art in Rome, and Dutch landscape painting, and classical music, which came a little later, but that regime of art is tied to the scientific industrial mode of production, and it extends all the way through high modernism. I don't think that the turn, that the modernist turn in art was a fundamental change. So Mondrian or Kandinsky or whatever, those figures are still part of that same globalist, integralist view, which is, atheist. It's anti-religious. It's anti. It views religion as superstition. In a way, it's a religion of its own, but it's this kind of progressivist. The god of progressive secularism is not designated as God, but there is an eschatology of a kind of progressive enlightenment. Um, so I pass on to the third view, which is LL and this is the nihilist view, where basically there is no faith in globalism and progressivism, and there is a kind of ethics around not believing in conventional morality, saying like the virtues that we sort of inherit from Christianity, that they're actually manipulative and exploitative, and they're just kind of holding us back. So reject that, possibly reject democracy, and there's a kind of faith in a kind of insurrectionary critique. At times, it can manifest as being politically very radical or politically very reactionary. The political compass doesn't really mean much, but it's this sort of insurrectionary nihilism that doesn't really know what it's aiming at, but it kind of has faith that just hurtling towards the void. Either maybe everything will be destroyed and that's fine, or maybe at the end of the tunnel there's some light that we can't even see, but that will actually be a good thing. And I would say in art this starts with Duchamp. I think there's a kind of there's something about his like early sculptures and the ready-mades and stuff that is just, it's totally different from any kind of modernism relating to like abstraction or cubism or anything representational. It's kind of like an assault on the art world itself, or on the relations of production, and this kind of like this kind of interrogation, this sort of like what is art really, going always sort of on the verge of causing the art world to collapse, or finding something that shouldn't count as art but turning it into art. And that goes up through, maybe it kind of ends with, there's Kippenberger, and then like relational aesthetics and institutional critique and things like that. I think that it's an open question of whether this regime of art is dead or not. I think it still exists, but it doesn't have the same pull that it once did. It's kind of become one style among others. So that's that is an era in art history. So that's one I point out, is that like that's kind of an era from the past of art history now. I think many artists still work in that modality, but it's not contemporary any longer, really, though I think we think of it, we would call it contemporary or postmodern. And this includes a lot of continental philosophy, like any type of philosophy that is kind of eager to kind of just destroy academia, sort of, or really kind of really critical of Western history, and want to go all the way with that. That would count as this as well. So then the final perspective is Sem. And this is basically the aesthetic dimension of life that is actually life itself. So like Sem, Sem is like it's my life, you know what I mean? Or in a wider scale, it's say like sort of collective awareness of global events, um, and you know, our just collective sense of history. Um, you know, that there's this way in which, like, even just the aesthetics of narratives involving just smaller groups of people, and canons, basically like everything that's aesthetic, but we don't really designate as part of an aesthetic canon. You know, like really art as life. Um, that's Sam. Um, and you know, I see Sam, I guess, as kind of the contemporary. So I mean, you know, in my view, the contemporary horizon of art, the actual contemporary one that uh, is kind of just being born, and that very few people participate in, is a kind of total art that not only brings together, you know, real concepts with artistic work, with music, which is something I'm interested in, but also one which is operating in all three of the regimes of art history that I mentioned, and is kind of seeking to construct something specific out of them, to kind of ideate about what role they can play in relationship to one another, how they can form a kind of structured positive feedback to create heaven, right? So this is an eschatological vision where kind of the aesthetic, you know, it's no longer about having a public and having a place in a canon. You know, so you know, my art, and this is what I'm trying to execute in my art. You know, my art is not, you know, this show, like, you know, clearly it's kind of fine art, and I have a lot of reference points in fine art, and that's kind of like the circuit that, you know, the exhibition is presented in. But you know, I think that fine art is just one thing, that there are other, you know, you know, like just like online consciousness is its own thing too, and the wider culture industry is its own thing, and the aesthetics of mysticism and religion are their own thing. And I guess I'm saying all this because basically I you know, I invite the viewer to view this work from all four of those perspectives. So these are four perspectives that are at odds with one another. Like, most people take for granted that one of those four views is true and good, and that the others are illusory and bad and false. Like, so if you're watching this, you probably do this too. And if you're watching this, it's probably either Ananon or LLC. And, you know, I guess my view is that there is a kind of higher freedom in having, sometimes I call it like a tetrascopic view, like literally like having four eyes, in holding together the contradictions between these four views. That, like, that is how you have a true vision of the world. A true view of the world is seeing all four of these, and that it's very hard to see the world accurately. You know, like there's so much ideology. You know, there's so much manipulation of people through algorithms and just through you know, decisions made in secret and that kind of thing. And also the world is just so complex that one mind can't really grasp all of it. It takes so much learning to kind of understand even any one field. And on top of it, we're also distracted and like afraid. So um, in this time when everyone is kind of losing their mind, uh, this this exhibition is kind of meant to, it's meant to in part just be a view into the wider world of my work and the wider world of the references that I work with in different domains. uh, and it's kind of just an attempt to, use the little bit of platform I have to sort of promote a kind of integralist consciousness that I think is really healthy and worthwhile and will be increasingly so as time goes on. So I guess part of why this work is at the doorpost of the entrance to the show is that it's like, it's you're sort of meant to confront the philosophical dimension of the show, and also to kind of confront, like, it's a little humiliating to like duck under this bar, and so it's, I guess to kind of just slightly kind of snap one out of the trance of the social convention of looking at art, and to look at it with maybe more gravity than you might bring to a traditional fine art experience. So there's some thoughts about that first piece.